If you're a regular viewer of this channel, then you'll already know how much I love the Zeiss Teleconverter for the Vivo X200 Ultra. What I don't love though is proprietary mounting systems. This lens only works with the official PGY Tech case because it uses this small bayonet mount, and for now that's fine. But when the X300 series comes out, God only knows if Vivo's going to continue using this mount. I hope they do, but there's no guarantees. This lens cost almost as much as lenses for my professional mirrorless camera, and if it's going to become useless next time you upgrade your phone, that's quite a tough sell. Wouldn't it be nice if you could use this lens with any phone you like? Well, it turns out you can, and today I'm going to show you how. A few months back, I came across a video on Bilibili, which is basically the Chinese version of YouTube, and a user named Lao Dai Donald had been tinkering with this teleconverter lens. First, he made it work as a telescope, which isn't really something I'm that interested in, but then he made it work with the X8 Ultra and the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. At the time I didn't have either of those phones, so I just kind of forgot about it. But I've now managed to get my hands on the X8 Ultra, so I decided to try it for myself. And then I did some more tinkering, and well, let me just show you what I came up with. Alright, so starting with the official case, I think you all know how it works. You line up the little dot on the bayonet mount, you click it into place, and then you can start shooting with the X200 Ultra. The design I got from the Bilibili user, we'll just call him Donald, because I'm not confident in my Chinese pronunciation. Basically, he made two of these caps that you can 3D print. This one's for the X8 Ultra, slots over the top of the phone, and adds a little bayonet mount that the teleconverter can slot into. It doesn't click into place, but it's a good enough mount to keep it in place. And, you know, it does work, but it's not an ideal setup. This cap isn't the most secure, it can slide off. And the other thing that bothered me is I couldn't put the lens on the other telephoto. This is the 6x telephoto at the top, and this is the 3x down here. And the reason you might want to use the 3x rather than the 6x is the minimum focus distance. The 3x is amazing for macro, just like the telephoto on the Vivo X200 Ultra. The 6x, however, can't really focus very close up. And I quite like using this telephoto adapter for close-ups because of the compression it creates, and it just like completely obliterates the background, turns it into a big blur, which I think looks wicked. But then redesigning this mount to fit down here, it's a pain in the arse. Plus, I'm a tech reviewer, I've got like a million phones. I'd like to try it on other phones too, and that got me thinking, what if I took this bayonet mount and made a universal adapter that could fit on pretty much any phone? After tinkering for about a week, this is the design I've come up with. It's designed to work with a phone clamp that has like a cheese plate mounting system on the back. There's a few different brands that have similar things. Like this small rig one has got a few different options on the back, and this one says Wu Hotto on it, but I've seen it sold under a few different brands. This one works best, to be honest, but I'm sure there are plenty of other designs that would work really well. My 3D print has a 1/4 sized hole that you line up with one of these holes on the back and you screw it into place. I'm using this 1/4 threaded thumb screw thing from, I think it came with a G-Un Lite I've got, but you could use anything. You could even just use a bolt with that Allen key. I'll show you how it works on the Oppo. Essentially, you can slide the phone clamp up and down the phone to position it closer to whichever lens you want. And because it's only got a single pivot point, you can move it up and down and forward and back. And these bolts are adjustable. So if you've got a different height camera bump, you can adjust it up and down. And if you've got a really big difference, you could use longer bolts. If you've got a tiny difference, you could use smaller bolts. And so far, with all the phones I've tried, it has lined up pretty easily. To give you a bit more detail, I'm using hex head M5 bolts, and I've made the design captive so they don't spin around. And then we've just got another bolt to lock it in place on this bottom plate, and two to lock it in place on the top plate. And yeah, you can just loosen these up, slide this up and down as required. For a lot of phones I've tried, that's about the right distance. But I did want to make it adjustable because, you know, some phones have massive camera bumps, some phones have tiny ones. So if I grab another phone, This is my Vivo X200 Pro. You want to figure out which lens is the telephoto. Quite easy on this one because it's got the square lens opening. You want to get it centered over the lens bit off there and tighten it down as much as you can. If you need to, adjust the bolts to make it more flush with the phone's actual lens. Then you just pop the teleconverter on and you're good to go. It's just strong enough to keep it in place. I think the best way to shoot with it is to keep a hand on the lens itself just to make sure it doesn't move around. But I've not had too much trouble with it drooping or anything, especially if you crank down on this 1/4-20 thread. I'll make the files for my adapter available in the description, so if you want to try it out and you've got a 3D printer, you can do so. And if enough people are interested, I might start selling these as a little kit. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. There are some big drawbacks to using this lens with other phones, so I just want to make sure you're well aware of them. But we'll go out and test this with a bunch of different phones. I've got the S25 Ultra here, iPhone 16 Pro, Vivo X200 Pro, and Find X8 Ultra. Oh, I'll also do the Huawei Pure 70 Ultra. Got to find that, but I think that'll be a good one as well. Anyway, enough blabbering. Let's go see how this lens adapter performs in the real world. Before we continue, I just want to give a massive shout out to Elegoo, who sent me their new Centauri Carbon 3D printer to help with making videos like this one. I used it for my last video where I printed a bunch of stuff for the CMF Phone 2 Pro. It worked flawlessly throughout, and it printed everything that you saw in this video too. Check the link in the description to find out more. It's a brilliant printer at a brilliant price, and it's well worth checking out. So I mentioned there are some downsides to using this lens with other phones, and if you used it with the Vivo X200 Ultra, you can probably guess what they are. When you use this lens without switching to the telephoto extender mode, it's a bit shaky and it's upside down. So you need to go into the actual telephoto extender mode for it to behave as you'd expect. Now when you're using a different phone, like this Galaxy S25 Ultra for example, you don't have a telephoto extender mode, so everything is going to be upside down, and that makes it really hard to frame your shots. So what can you do about that? Well, for video, if you have the Blackmagic camera app, you can see it's still upside down. If you go to the settings, go to camera, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see flip image for SLR lens. Toggle that on, and then everything's the right way up. The shake, not so much you can do about that. Maybe, holding the lens steady, maybe you can do some post-processing to make it look better. But that's all good for video. What if you want to do photos? There's no way to flip the image in the default camera app. And I've tried to use screen rotating apps, but they just don't seem to work. What you can do is install Open Camera. In here, you can go to Camera Preview, scroll all the way to the bottom. Sorry about the wind. Tap Rotate Preview, tap 180 degrees, and then all your cameras will be flipped upside down. So you can see within this app, the camera's the right way up. The downside to this is you're not going to get the processing that you know from your phone. So, for instance, Vivo has really good image processing, but you wouldn't get it using Open Camera. And not all phones are fully compatible. The Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra is, so that might be a good option. But you probably are going to have to take your photos into Lightroom to get them looking their best. But at least you can shoot with it that way. If neither of those options solve your problem, there is a bit of a wild card option that turns your phone into a bit of a monster rig. This is the Small Rig wireless video monitor, which is basically designed so you can film yourself with the rear cameras on your phone and still be able to see yourself. It basically works like a Chromecast, so you mirror your screen like as if you're casting it to a TV, and you basically get another version of your phone screen up on this screen. And because it's designed for filming yourself, double tapping the power button flips the image 180. That's because filming yourself with the rear cameras, it's very disorienting if it's not mirrored like it would be on a selfie camera. But yeah, this works across every app because it's just mirroring your screen and literally mirroring your mirrored screen. So yeah, bit of a mad rig. It is an option, and if like me you already have all the bits for it, then why not use them? Okay, just to explain what I did for this first test, I set up a tripod facing this little castle on a hill. First I used the X200 Ultra without the teleconverter adapter, then with the teleconverter adapter, and like at a medium level zoom and then maximum zoom. And I did the same thing for all of the phones I had with me. The only one I didn't end up doing it for was the iPhone. Basically, when I put the teleconverter adapter in front of the iPhone telephoto, it just kept switching to a different lens. It didn't like having the teleconverter in front of it. On most phones, I would switch into Pro mode and force it to use the lens that I've chosen, but you can't do that on iPhone, so I probably need to use a different app. But moving on to our photos, I've got the X200 Ultra on the left, and I did forget to turn the watermark on, but I think all the others have the watermark on, so we'll be able to see which is which. But the X200 Ultra is always going to be on the left as our like control image. This is taken with the 85mm without the teleconverter, just to give you a point of reference. And I won't be comparing the phones without the teleconverter, because what's the point? I just wanted to show that obviously the X200 Pro will have the same focal length. It looks a bit different because of the watermark, but it's the same focal length effectively. On the Oppo we use the 6x lens, so it's a little more zoomed in by default. Samsung was on the 5x, so that's also a little more zoomed in. And Huawei is 4x, so that's also a little bit more zoomed in than our X200 Ultra. So moving on to some shots with the teleconverter attached. The Ultra is obviously in its dedicated telephoto extender mode, which means it uses the vivid color profile, which explains the drastic difference in color compared to the X200 Pro. And as you can see, the sharpness is way higher on the X200 Ultra, which makes it look a bit better. I think if you turned up the sharpness a bit on the X200 Pro, it could look quite similar, but by default, it just doesn't look quite as good. It doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look quite as good either. Now this is the Oppo with the teleconverter attached. Obviously it's a little bit more zoomed in because we're on the 6x rather than a 3.7x. I actually prefer the exposure of the Oppo here, and it looks very sharp and very detailed. I would say quite comparable to the X200 Ultra. I really like that. Now this is one from the S25 Ultra with the teleconverter attached, and really washed out and really grey, which is quite bizarre. They weren't taken at exactly the same time, but they were taken within 10 minutes of each other, so they look like different seasons in these photos. Not really sure why that's happened. Detail's pretty good though. Like plenty of detail on these little people on the hill. You can still make out this like antenna on top of the castle. It's called Old John. I'll just call it Old John from now on. Yeah, it doesn't look as good as the Vivo, but it doesn't look bad either. Now finally the Huawei, and it's gone extremely green, which is a Huawei thing that happens from time to time. Great dynamic range. Love how these clouds look above the hill. I think that's great. I would tone down the greens a bit, but you know, you can do that in your editing software easy enough. Looking pretty sharp at a glance. But when we zoom in, you can see that the sharpness level is definitely lower than the Vivo shot. There is some detail there, but it's just a bit more mushy. So I kind of messed up a little bit. On the X200 Ultra, this is my mid-level zoom shot, and this is my maximum level zoom shot. But on the other phones, I did the native telephoto with the teleconverter, then I did 10x, then I did 20x. So on the X200 Pro, this is 10x on the right, but that doesn't really line up. The mid-level zoom shot is actually closer to the 20 times shot. I'll skip to 20 times on each phone. Pretty plain to see the difference here. The X200 Pro is looking very soft, and there's some like aberration around the edge of the building. It's quite bad actually. I don't know if shake or wind might have knocked the lens out of alignment a bit, but yeah, it didn't do a very good job here. Switching over to the Oppo, which actually looks awesome at a glance anyway. Wow. I think the Oppo kind of looks better. Maybe a tiny bit noisier in the shadows, but I think the detail might be better. I think these people here look a lot better than they do on the Vivo shot. To be fair, the people over here aren't great on either, but that's really quite good from Oppo. So for photography, I think using this lens with the Oppo Find X8 Ultra is a real option. Now the Samsung, very, very grey and washed out again, but it's not looking too bad. Definitely not as much detail as Oppo had, but it's not actually that far behind Vivo. Pretty bad aberration on the building. It just doesn't look very nice, does it? The Vivo looks a lot more lifelike. The colors are richer and warmer. There's like, it's basically grayscale on Samsung, but I am impressed with the detail. I think that is quite good. Finally, we have Huawei, which again looks quite good, but not as nice as Vivo's shot. And I don't think it really holds up when we zoom in a bit more. That's pretty nasty. Lots of image processing oddities going on, very watercolor, so that's not so good. But hats off to Oppo, because wow, really, you've really impressed me with this one. So when it comes to video recordings, even using a tripod, pretty much all of them were too shaky to be considered usable, which is a massive downgrade compared to the X200 Ultra, which you can happily use handheld all day, and it looks pretty smooth. The one that did the best was again Oppo. It was much more stable than the others. However, anytime you touch the phone to change a setting, it would shake like crazy. If you are using a tripod, you could probably clean it up just enough with some stabilization software. But honestly, on any phone other than the X200 Ultra, I don't think shooting video with this lens is really a viable option. So after shooting this comparison, I did a little more experimenting with some ducks I saw on the way back. This time I was using the 3x on the Oppo just because it has a very close minimum focusing distance. And I was blown away by the results. Look at the compression on this. This doesn't look like it was taken by a phone, in my opinion. And the details are stunning. Like the water on the back of this duck, the dirt flying up as it waddled along. The focus didn't hit the eye quite on this one. Other than that, pretty stunning. And this one might be even better. I just think these photos are pretty incredible. So following this comparison, I decided to do a bit more experimenting with the Open Camera app, just because it's a very easy way to shoot. You don't need an accessory like that small rig monitor. I wasn't sure if the processing would be good enough, so I just wanted to try it out, compare it to the default processing, and see if it's a viable option. I shot with the Oppo, the X200 Pro, and the Huawei Pure 70 Ultra. So you might wonder why I keep playing with the Huawei. It's not even a current phone, and it didn't do particularly well in the last test. Well, these images here should help to explain that. Basically, the Pure 70 Ultra has an incredible telemacro camera. It can focus closer than pretty much any other phone that I've got. On the left, this is the X200 Pro with the teleconverter at its minimum focus distance. And on the right is the Pure 70 Ultra at its minimum focus distance. It's a pretty big difference. These ones were both taken with Open Camera, and as you can see, they are a little soft. I think it's motion blur, and that might be something that's hard to avoid compared to the default camera. But let's go outside where the lighting's better and see how they did. So starting with the Oppo, on the left hand side I've got the default camera photo, obviously with the teleconverter attached, and on the right we've got the photo from Open Camera. You can see there's definitely a difference in the colours. Bit contrastier, more vibrant using the default camera compared to Open Camera, but that's something that can be very easily adjusted. When we zoom in, the level of detail is very similar, as it should be, but the default camera looks a bit cleaner and a little bit sharper, and that's all down to image processing. Like you can see this grain and noise in the Open Camera image, so you might need to apply a bit of denoising, might want to bring up the contrast and sharpness slightly if you want to match the default camera more closely. But I'm pleasantly surprised that the difference isn't huge here, and you can definitely tweak this image in your preferred image editor to get it looking closer to the default. Obviously we're in bright sunlight here, but this plant, whatever it is, very interesting plant. I think it was a weed, but really cool looking. It was blowing around in the wind, so there was motion in the scene, plus the shake from my hands as I was trying to take the photo, and it's done a good job in this lighting. So maybe more of an issue when the light gets low, because I don't think you can really do night mode or anything with Open Camera, but in the day it's looking pretty good, at least on the Oppo. Now this one's with the Huawei. Obviously we can get a lot closer to the plant with that crazy microscope lens. We've got the default camera version on the left, as you can see by the watermark, and the Open Camera version on the right. Similar thing going on with the colours, bit more vibrant, bit more contrast on the default camera shot. Details are pretty good on both, but it looks a lot sharper on the default camera compared to open camera. Again, I think with some image editing, you could get the open camera version pretty close. So it's looking like a viable option, especially if you're not afraid of a bit of Lightroom or Photoshop. Now finally the X200 Pro, with another very pretty weed coming out of a wall. I think the lighting was quite different on these two. I think it clouded over, so we've got some more sunlight on our side for the open camera version, which does make the scene look a bit more vibrant. But how do the details look? Bizarrely, in this case, the open camera version actually looks a bit sharper, but that could be just misfocus. So let's try another one, slightly worse framing on this one on the default camera. Yeah, but that sharpness is better. I am quite surprised how similar these are. If you zoom really far, you can see a bit of added sharpness and better dynamic range actually on the default camera app. Like you can see the veins of this leaf here, it's blown out on open camera, but it's really not too bad. So yeah, in the right lighting conditions, I think open camera is a viable option, which is great news. Okay, that's about it for this one. I hope you found it useful. And if anyone knows how to flip the image while recording in the default camera app, please leave a comment, because it's like the missing part of the puzzle at this point. But yeah, if you like this kind of thing, get subscribed, because there's always more tinkering, more phone cameras, and more stuff like that on the way. And I will catch you in the next one. Toodles.